You guys, it's Judy Blume. I'm Liz Hoddle, Deputy Director of Events at Politics and Prose. Thank you for joining us on this rainy, rainy night. Politics and Prose has author events all over this city every single night in our Connecticut Avenue store and in our new Busboys and Poets locations. But our partnership with Sixth and I is a truly special one. Tonight is the crowning event in another blockbuster season, and it does kind of feel like everything this year has been building up to this moment. Judy Blume is one of the most beloved authors living today. She has won countless awards, including the National Book Foundation's Medal for Distinguished Contribution to American Letters. She's sold over 85 million books in 32 languages. And every one of those readers, and I'm sure everyone in this room, has one that is their favorite, a book or character that made them feel less alone. For some, it's Forever, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, Tiger Eyes, or Summer Sisters. For me, it was otherwise known as Sheila the Great. And while many of her books are centered around children and teenagers, not one of them is a kid's book. They're all just people books. That's why we hold them so close to us so many years later. This week, the news in our country has been dominated by the story of a woman with a secret self who finally made the decision to live her life freely. I don't think there could be a more perfect time for the publication of a new Judy Blume novel. More than any other writer, Judy has always been honest with her readers and demanded honest lives from them. She's given all of our secret selves validation, insisted that we show them to the world. Judy is our culture's own best voice. Her newest novel, In the Unlikely Event, is Judy's most ambitious work to date, but it maintains the humor, warmth, and impeccable storytelling we count on her for. In it, Miri Ammerman returns to her hometown to attend a commemoration of the winter of 1951 to 1952, when, in the space of 58 days, 3 planes crashed on the New Jersey town of Elizabeth. We are introduced to a tapestry of well-worn characters and plots that intersect in compelling but natural ways. As Carolyn Levitt wrote in the New York Times Book Review, In the Unlikely Event makes us feel the pure shock and wonder of living. Tonight, Judy is joined by Linda Holmes of NPR's Pop Culture Happy Hour. Yeah. Just like Judy, Linda is the person who says what you think about things, only better. And we trust her because she's earned our trust, never talking down to things, always honoring the humanity in the most unexpected places, from The Bachelorette to Mad Men and back again. Please put your hands together and help me welcome to Sixth and I, Linda Holmes and Judy Blume.
Thank you. Here's to you.
Here's to you, too. Welcome to all of you. I appreciate you all coming to Sixth and I to participate in this dream that I am having in 1982. When I am 11. So I am right in that sweet spot. I am in the sweetest part of the sweet spot. And I would have been thrilled at that time to know that at this time I would not only be sitting here to have this conversation, but that I would have just finished a terrific Judy Blume book. And so In the Unlikely Event is set. Why don't you talk a little bit about the basic kind of setting and framing of the book?
I like it when you do it. All right. Winter of 1951, 1952, 3 months. And this, you know, it's about the families. It's not so much about these events, but everything goes along, people fall in love, and kids go to school, and parents go to work, and then this crazy thing happens. And in 58 days, 3 commercial airline planes crash into the city. One very close to the junior high where I was a student then, but it was a Sunday. The next one, I hate to be giving you spoilers here, but everybody seems to know this already. So
It's history.
around.
It's
around.
history. Yeah.
And the second one, just missing the all-girls public high school and St. Mary's, which was across the street. Literally, people saw it coming through the window, and at the last minute, the pilot somehow was able to pull up and crashed into the residential area. And the third, in the middle of a moonlit night, into the playing field of the only orphanage in town. So this spoke to the kids in town in a different way than it spoke to the adults. To the kids, it was like they're out to get us. You know, we don't know who they are, but it's clear because they're after the kids because of the proximity to schools and orphanages, right? And so the boys in junior high, this is why Mary had to be in junior high, the boys in junior high are all about aliens and flying saucers and, you know, zombies, whatever. You need to figure out what's going on. And so that's how the boys figured it out. The girls, the smart girls, were into sabotage. A very sexy, sophisticated word that I didn't know what it meant, but I said, yes, of course it's sabotage.
Right.
And we didn't know exactly who it was who was after us, but we knew. A lot of people said communists.
Sure.
Because it was Cold War time. And nobody ever talked to us about it. Not our parents, not our teachers. So we were left to figure out on our own what was going on.
I was a little shocked to realize that I had never heard of this. I didn't know this story. That I didn't know a story about 3 plane crashes in one town in this stretch of time. Why do you think that this is a story that people don't know?
Well, I don't know. You know, it's very interesting because my husband, who's from Baltimore and sitting over there, was, what were you, George? What? Civil Air Patrol, a kid who went every weekend and did something that was called Civil Air Patrol. Because they were, you know, worried about the communists, and so they tracked planes. He knew about this, although I had never mentioned this story to him.
Oh, yeah.
Or even to my daughter, who became a commercial airline pilot. That story was so buried inside me for so many years. How could I be a writer for 46 years? They tell me 46 years, I don't know. And have this story and never think to tell it.
When did you start thinking about telling it? When did you start thinking about writing a story framed around those events?
It all came to me at once in one moment in January 2009. And it took 5 years to do it. But in that one moment, that's never happened to me. It will never happen to me again. But somebody was talking about the 50s on stage. And that was all I heard, the 50s. And it was like the light bulb went off. Boing, I have this story. I never forgot the story. You know, I didn't know then as much as I know now, but I knew it. But it never occurred to me to bring it up from wherever it was, somewhere so deep inside, I guess. And it came to me. It came to me with 3 families. It came to me with, you know, kind of structure and plot, which I'm not good at all. But it had a plot, and I couldn't wait to begin. I started my research on Monday morning.
Well, you talk about the research that it takes to do a book like this, particularly when it is based on real events. What were the parts of the story that you thought it was most important to report exactly as they happened, in terms of, like, what did you think you needed to research to make sure it was exactly right, despite the fact that elements of it are fiction?
Absolutely everything about the crashes had to be exactly right. And from the news stories, because remember, there was no TV news coverage then. Mm. You know, you didn't come home and the TV was on and it was, you know, and you're seeing this event all the time, the way people do now. it was up to the reporters and the news photographers to paint this picture for the people. However, I have to say, at 14, I don't think I read the paper. That wasn't what I did, but I knew, I heard enough, and I heard plenty at school, and I knew this and I knew that, and there was a boy who lived in the orphanage, and I knew a lot, but nowhere near enough to write a book. And so for about 5 months, I researched this. And the truth is, I never wanted to stop researching it. I've never done research as a writer because I'm a fiction writer, and all my nonfiction writing friends, including my husband, everybody said, yeah, that's the fun part, but then you still have to write the book, which is true. And
otherwise, you're just a very voracious reader.
the researching it's so interesting, and you just go from thing to thing to thing. And I have read in articles that I researched so well what people wore and what scents they used, and from the lipsticks to the shoes and everything. And I'm thinking, I didn't research any of that. I remembered it. I knew that. I knew that stuff. I knew we put Angora sweaters in the refrigerator, and we wore pixie pink lipstick, and and all the music. I don't know if they were playing the playlist when you came in, but if you heard music, did you hear music? That's the playlist from the book. There's a lot of music references in the book, and so we got those songs. I did have to check to make absolutely certain, but really I remembered. I knew who I was making out with to what song.
It's funny that you would say that, because I told somebody the other day, I was among the people, I don't know if there are others here, I owned the Judy Blume diary, which was a little, it was a diary that it had a kind of a plastic spiral binding, and you could write all your feelings in it. I was trying to remember, when did I have the Judy Blume diary? When would that have been? And I thought, well, I was writing about insert boy's name here, so that would have been 5th grade. And it's sort of, you peg memories by those specific kinds of things.
You do.
One of the things that emerges in the book as kind of a theme is this idea, that referenced in the title, that these are all, one of the things I think is interesting about it is it doesn't turn out to have any one cause, right? That as you're saying, the fear of was it sabotage? Was it something else? It turns out to be kind of, a variety of things that are going on. Mm-hmm. And it seemed like what was emerging was that for all of these people as well, what was happening in their lives was kind of a sum of seemingly random, sometimes seemingly insignificant things that had these massive effects on what happened to them and the direction that their lives took. Do you have unlikely events in your own life that feel like, had I done this instead of that, had I taken this phone call versus not, that everything turns out differently?
Who doesn't, right? Don't we all have unlikely events? And there's a moment in the book that I never planned, that came spontaneously, which is always the best way, I think, when you're writing. It's like, how did I think of that? How did I do that? And there's a child on a plane talking to the grown-up Miri. And when the flight attendant says, in the unlikely event, and the child, Lily, turns to Miri and says, I don't like when they say that. And Miri explains to her that not all unlikely events are bad. Some of them are really good, like Miri and Lily meeting on the plane.
What kinds of unlikely events do you think about in your trip through all of this that you've done in your life? What kinds of things do you think about as unlikely events?
Well, it's an unlikely event that I ever became a writer, and that this happened. I mean, what an unlikely scenario. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know anything. I didn't know anybody who wrote or had written. I didn't have writer friends. And how unlikely, when I think back, how incredibly lucky and wonderful that's turned out.
What was the initial impulse? I'm going to write books. I'm going to try to write books.
You know, I'm not sure I ever said that. I think what it was that I had a lot of creative energy as a kid in school. I was happy because I liked doing all those creative things, you know, dancing, singing, newspaper, drama. And then I married when I was young, and I had 2 babies by the time I was 25. My generation did that. And I began to get sick a lot and feel unhappy, although I would never admit that to anyone because we didn't admit we were unhappy, those of us who grew up in the 50s. Everything was a secret, you know. I mean, secrets were very big in the 50s when we grew up. Parents kept secrets from kids and stopped talking when the kids came into the room. They didn't really tell you anything. Nobody did. So sometimes what you invented was much worse than the reality. And I'm losing track of this.
We were just talking about
my unlikely event.
We were just talking about we're talking about the beginning of writing books.
Yeah. I told my kids about this book. I said, if ever you start telling me that I'm losing my memory because I can't find my keys or my car or something, just remember, I'm keeping track of hundreds of characters in this book, and I know them all really, really well. But what started the writing of books, I needed that creative outlet. It could have been anything, I think. You know, the first career I had, very briefly, was, and Sandra, my roommate, can tell you, I made felt pictures for children's bedrooms out of felt and little trim, and I used Elmer's glue, and I packed them in a suitcase one day, and I took them to New York to Bloomingdale's, and somebody took pity on me and got me to the children's accessories buyer at Bloomingdale's, and he bought 3 of them. This was one of the greatest moments of my life. I mean, you know, I got paid $9 a picture. Oh, you know, cost me maybe $3 to make it. And they would call me up and say, we need a pink and green one and with Linda on it. And it was like, okay. And I had little kids, and they sat on the floor and they played with the scraps. And I got kind of sensitive to the Elmer's glue, and my fingers were peeling. Mm-hmm. And if you don't believe this, Sandra knows it's true. And that's when I decided I needed another career.
Glue allergy.
And that's when I started trying to write children's books.
Yeah. So it was always your thought at the beginning that you would write for kids?
Always, because that's who I knew, that's who I was, that's what I remembered. At first they were really bad rhyming imitation Dr. Seuss books, but then, you know, gradually it was like, well, I like to read novels. I'm going to try to write what we call novels for children. What today they would call them maybe chapter books. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then, Margaret was the 3rd published book, and with Margaret, I just let go. I let it rip, and I just was determined to tell what I knew to be true. I mean, it was my reality, not anybody else's, but to be honest and tell the truth.
Did you feel, when I was rereading Margaret recently, I was struck by how much it is a story about puberty and religion and families and all of that stuff, but that it also is very much the story of her initiation into the experience of being invited to judge herself very harshly. That as soon as she falls in with these girls, that one of the first things they start to say is, you know, judge your experience with boys, judge whether you have breasts. And up until then, she's in this world of kind of, I like this, I don't like this, I'm unhappy about my mom or whatever. but then she's kind of brought into this group of girls who on the one hand include her, but on the other hand are really inviting her to begin to measure herself. And I'm wondering...
It's so sad. I don't think about it like that.
Well, no, I don't.
I don't. It's okay. You know, this is what's great about these things, is I don't know what you're going to say. and so...
It's great for me, too. No, I think what I mean is it's partly the story of her learning to navigate that experience. That's what I mean.
Well, maybe because she's turning 12,
right.
And at that age, that's what happens to everybody.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. It's it's that universal, that one of those universal experiences of her growing up is that kind of, am I okay? Right?
Am I normal? I want to be
taking your
normal.
own temperature a lot as a person. Am I normal? Am I okay? She has the teacher who asks the questions that somebody tells her to figure out whether you're normal. And I'm curious about whether, I feel like now I can't ask whether that's kind of a theme, because it's not even...
You can ask anything.
I mean, I feel like that comes up in a lot of your books, that idea of kids trying to survive the experience of, am I normal? Am I okay? Are things all right? Does that ring true with you at all?
It probably was the way I felt. Probably was. Yeah.
Because I think that was probably...
I used to talk to God a lot about being normal. I didn't know what normal was, but I knew that I just wanted to be normal.
In what ways?
I don't care about that anymore. Isn't that good?
It's great.
I don't even want to be normal.
And I think that's a part of that cycle. Sort of originally you don't care, and then you care for a long time, and then you don't care. That's sort of perhaps that's the ideal arc. I don't know.
Good.
These books, I think, for a lot of people, opened up conversations between kids and other kids, or kids and their parents. I had a friend tell me today, to pass along to you, that his mother gave him a copy of Then Again, Maybe I Won't, which is why he said he didn't look his mother in the eye from 1979 to 1984. So it's not... Do you think that part of the influence of these books is opening up those conversations for kids to be able to talk about things with their parents and other people in their lives?
That would be good. I like that idea. I hope so.
What made you decide to write adult books after you had been writing books for kids for a long time, if that was the initial impulse?
I think the stories just bubbled up. You know, the wifey just bubbled up. It's like, I am really a grown woman, not a 12-year-old girl, and I have other stories that I want to tell. But I never, left the kids. I mean, I did Wifey, I went back to kids' books, and then I did Smart Women, and I went back to kids' books, and Summer Sisters, which was the last book that I was ever going to write. I swore I would never, ever do it again. Mm-hmm. And I even asked my husband, this is Judy's insecurity, I'm never doing it again. I can't do it again. Okay? He says, okay. I say, tell me I won't wind up. This is 17 years ago. I don't think we use this expression anymore. Tell me I won't wind up a bag lady if I don't write anymore. He says, okay.
Probably not.
Okay. You won't. He's not. You won't wind up a bag lady. But I don't really believe that, And so I wrote more books. I wrote for children. I took a long break, and then the bug came back and bit me. And with this book, I never, ever expected to write a long, complicated, 400-page, 5-year project of a book. Never dreamed of it, never wanted to. And now I'm saying that again. George, I don't want to write any more books like that. Is that okay?
Was there ever any nervousness about writing something different from something that had been so successful for you, either professionally or personally, anxiety about what that would be like?
You know, I'm an anxious person. I was a very anxious kid. My mother was a very anxious mother. And I had a lot of eczema, and I had a lot of stomach pains. And yet, when I go into that little room and I write, I'm some other person. I'm this fearless person. I'm the person that I really want to be. I want to say to my father, I am an adventurer, just like you wanted me to be. When I'm in that room, I'm different. And people said, you know, wifey will ruin your career. You have to use a different name. You can't do this. And I said, but, you know, here I am talking about honesty and truth all the time. I can't do that. And, well, if it ruins my career, I don't know what I was thinking. But I needed to write that book.
Yeah.
And so I did.
And it didn't, it seems to have turned out. I mean, I think everybody has that story of the person who read Wifey accidentally.
Oh, yes.
You know what I mean?
At 13 or
At
something.
13. I found it at my grandma's house, and things like, which is its own question, if you think about it. Why is it at grandma's house?
I'm glad it was at grandma's house.
Absolutely. Well, that's what I mean.
Good for grandma.
If grandma's going to be horrified that you're reading it, why is grandma reading it? That's the question. Speaking of which, you have done a lot of work with books that have been banned or protested and stuff like that. What do you think is the underlying, what's the angst that makes people worry so much about what kids read?
Remember your question, because I'm going to go back to the 50s for a second. And this very anxious mother of mine was a reader, and my father was a reader, and they could not have been happier that I was reading. And there were no YA books then. So at 12, I was in my parents' bookshelves. You know, nobody told me you can't read that book. Reading was a good thing, something to be celebrated. That was a great gift that my parents gave to me. So then go ahead to 1980, which is when all of this really started. And the censors come out of the woodwork overnight and say, no, you know, and they run into schools waving books. I don't want this book in your library. I don't want my child to read this book. But in those days, before schools and libraries had their policies in place, a lot of books were removed out of fear. I do believe it was fear on the parents' part. You know, if my child reads this book, this is going to happen to my child will do this. I mean, puberty. You know, we're talking puberty. It's going to happen whether you want it to or not. You know, if your kid doesn't read about it, it's still going to happen. And that was a crazy time of fear, and that fear was contagious. And it's still going on in a different way, and I'm not just talking about my books. And it's gone, you know, from extreme right-wing religious right, it's gone all the way, and now we have so much on the left. You know, we need trigger warnings in college textbooks because a student may get upset reading this. I mean, come on, you're in college. You're supposed to get upset and have discussions. It's this idea that you can protect your children from the real world, from what's going to happen to them. And you can't, so you might as well try to prepare them, talk to them.
Is that what you think? Is that what you think they want? They want sort of to keep the kids away from the thing actually happening, because it just seems so. You know what I mean? It seems so illogical.
I know.
When it comes, as you said, with puberty, it's like, what do you think you're going to accomplish by not reading the book? Is that?
Well, you know, I would hear, in those days, I would hear from parents who would write to me angry letters and say, I wanted to be the one to tell my son. And I'm thinking, well, why didn't you? Mm-hmm. What were you waiting for? You know, are you waiting until he's 21? What, you know, you've got to do it when the child asks a question.
If you were writing similar books for sort of kids growing up now, as similar to the ones that you were writing at that time, what kinds of things do you think you would wind up writing about more now than you would have then?
I have no idea, and I'm glad I don't have to write them again. I have friends younger than me, very good writers. A lot of them write YA books, and they're very successful, and I'm proud of them, and I love that they do that. I personally have no interest in writing YA books. I never did write YA books. Maybe forever, if it was published today, it would be published YA. But really, there was no such category then.
Right.
I hate categories anyway. This is adult. There's no reason in the world why a teenager who's interested can't read it. You know, I was with Meg Wolitzer last night, and Meg writes for both adults and a YA audience. And what she says, and I love this, and so I'm using it now, is what's the difference between YA and adult? And she says for her the difference is in a novel that's being published as an adult novel, which means it just comes out of that department, and then in a store it has to be bought by, you know, the book buyer who buys adult books, is that in an adult book you can meander as a writer. You can go into the heads of adult characters, which I wanted to do in this book. And for her, a YA book is more focused on one character telling a story. Very often they're first person, which I started. I didn't really start it. I didn't really start it. But I liked it. And then I got tired of it when everyone else started doing it.
You know, we talked a little bit about the diaries and the reactions that people have to these books. Does the sense that people see you as kind of a confidant or confessor or sister or aunt, has that ever been overwhelming?
Yes. Yes. It can be overwhelming. And for a while there, I got too involved with some of the kids who wrote to me. I got very emotionally involved with them. I had to go to a counselor to help me, because I'm not trained, you know, in the helping professions. My daughter's a therapist, but I'm not. She, who was an airline pilot first, who said, "Mother," when she read the book in an early draft, "you never told me this story about the planes." Anyway, but I'm meandering, as Meg
It's an
said.
adult novel.
It's an adult conversation.
It's an adult conversation.
So we can go wherever
Meandering
we
is
want.
allowed.
But yeah, I had to go get some help to be able to be supportive and yet step back. Because there were a couple of kids I wanted to save, you know, wanted to bring them to live with me. This never would have worked out, but I had those feelings for them.
It's a very, but I mean, that's a very intense result of writing books, you know? It's a very particular kind of outcome that has such a wonderful upside in so many ways, as you've said. But that is a challenging thing, and I think still, I see you on Twitter, and people are still so excited to talk to you, and do you feel like that's a little bit easier now to put that distance between kind of that appropriate level
the
of...
people who want to, you know, my tweeps,
Right,
my
your
Twitter
tweeps.
friends, they're older now. They're not, but I have to tell you, a wonderful story is last night online in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. A young woman came up to me, and of course I recognized her right away, and it was a girl who wrote to me when she was 9, and she lived in Korea. She's Korean. And she wrote in those days in the style of Louisa May Alcott. And she wrote in her first letter, I quoted this to her last night. She went under the table. I quake in my boots each time a boy approaches the B shelf of the library, lest he sees something he should not, which was my books. And she was a wonderful, wonderful writer, and she's grown up now, and she's got 2 kids, and she came to Doylestown last night. I have seen her over the years, but I haven't seen her, I think, since she married. And that was wonderful. That was wonderful. A long relationship like that.
Has engaging with people on Twitter and stuff like that come kind of naturally? Does that feel like a normal thing to you, or is it weird? Was it weird at first?
No, I like Twitter. People say to me, oh, your publisher got you to do Twitter because they knew when you had a new book. I've been on Twitter for years, and I love it. And at one point, my husband said to me, during our morning walk, when I was writing this book, if you'd finish the damn book, you'd lay in bed all day and tweet.
So now you can. So now the book is done. You can tweet all you want. You can just follow everybody and tweet all day. What do you feel? I mean, you got to get to a certain point where you say, okay, so list of things to accomplish, right? Write a bunch of books, 85 million.
Oh, yeah, like I thought that in the beginning.
Right, of course. That was on the list,
right?
I'm sure. Very beloved. What now do you aspire to with the books that you write now? I mean, obviously never selling 85 million was not the point, but what is how do you tell kind of how it's going? Do you know what I mean?
I get anxious with a new book. Will my readers like it? And I've had very lovely feedback so far. So I feel good and less anxious than I did. But I don't know. I mean, what do I want? Somebody asked me, what's left on your bucket list? I don't know, more of the same. Give me more of the same for a few more years,
That's a good place to be.
I am 77, so
that's a good
I
place
would like
to be.
more of the same.
It's a very good place to be.
I want more time with George and with my kids and with my friends, and I like to mentor new writers. I'd like more time for that.
Who do you read right now? Whose stuff are you reading right now?
When I'm writing fiction, no fiction.
Really?
No. Dangerous.
Not going to get in your head.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I learned that the hard way. One time, I was writing Smart Women, and I read a wonderful novel called Dad by William Wharton, because we were then staying for a few months in that area, kind of Venice Beach, California, where it took place. And it was a long book, and I read the whole book, and then the little voices went off inside my head. You don't know how to do this. You're no good at it. What are you bothering for? This is a good book. What you're writing is nothing. I couldn't write for 3 months. So I learned not to read fiction while I'm writing it. I did listen to some. So taking it in that way is less likely to trigger that response, or no?
No,
not really.
I can, if I get involved with somebody else's characters, and if it's good, I do. So I read one book in the middle of all of this that I liked very much, and it was so different, and it was so wonderful, and it was called, don't tell me, George, don't tell me. We Are All Completely Beside Ourselves. I thought that was a wonderful book, and I didn't know anything about it, and I am so glad I didn't, and I loved it. And it was okay. I must have been, through enough drafts. I write like 20 drafts of these books, and I must have been enough through it that I knew I was safe. But otherwise, it's a dangerous thing.
Yeah, I can see that. See how that would happen. All right, let's do some of these index card questions.
Okay.
Got all these index card questions. I could try to get to some of these.
What is your favorite fan story? Is it the girl from Korea? Did I already spoil it?
Favorite fan story? I don't know. There are so many. I can't think of one. Ask me something else.
Have you written anything that you haven't published?
In the very beginning, I have them in boxes, and they say on it to my kids, I love you. If you publish these after I die, I will come back and haunt you. They're mostly picture books that I illustrated myself, and I put them together with brass fasteners. I thought I should keep them.
What do you think is the most controversial book you've written? In terms of the one that has started the most?
Well, I don't think any of them are controversial. I don't think they're controversial. They're just about people living lives. So I don't see them as controversial. But I can read a book now, and I will know that if it's a book that kids really like, that book is going to be in trouble. Because they don't come after books, really, that kids don't like, because how would they know to come after that book if kids didn't like it? So...
It's a fair question. Is there anything you would have done differently in Margaret's story?
It's done. I wouldn't do... No. I'm easy on myself once the books are published. Sometimes I'll take one off the shelf and I'll, skim through it and I'll say, oh my God, especially with blubber. I'll say, how did I know that? I don't know that now. How did I know that? Where did that come from? And I think it's because when you're writing, you're not aware of what you know or where it comes from, because it comes from some other part of your brain. And so it's very interesting to take it off and say, I can't believe I wrote that because I don't even know that.
How do you organize your time to get so much writing done?
Well, I don't get a lot of writing done. 5 years. I organize my time. I can tell you my day, okay? I get up. I go for a 2-mile walk. I have a good breakfast. I take a shower. I get dressed. I go in my T-shirt and jeans into my little study, and I stay there till lunch. And if it's a first draft of a book, it's torture. I hope the phone will ring. Sandra, that's when you should call me.
How does it feel to have your books still making an impact? I like the rest of this question. My mom loved your books growing up, and now I do. I'll never forget my first time reading Forever with my bunkmates at sleepaway camp. You are truly an inspiration.
I would have read Forever with my bunkmates at sleepaway camp, too.
It's good for that. It's good for that. So the question was, how does it feel to have your books still making such an impact?
It feels really good. I mean, if you had asked me way back 46 years ago, are your books still going to be read? Then I remember somebody asked me, do you think your books will still be read in 20 years? And I said, who cares if they're being read now? I don't care. So it feels good.
Yeah. They are still being read.
Yes, I know.
Obviously.
I know.
As we can tell, Forever at sleepaway camp.
On all wonderful new covers. And the advice I give parents, if you want your young kids to read the books that you loved so much when you were young, don't give them your old worn-out copies that you love, because to them it's like, this is so not cool. So if you can possibly swing it, and I'm not looking for my 10-cent royalties on these paperbacks, get the new covers. They update the covers regularly, and there's a great new set of covers right now. and just leave them around the house. And every now and then say, no, I don't think you're ready for that. Right?
That reminds me, I was going to ask you, how do you think parents can balance, on the one hand, they want their kids to love to read books and love to read books that they love, but they also want to push their kids to read things that are challenging and maybe aren't the things that they gravitate to instantly. Is there a balancing there?
Well, I mean, I tell parents, and I'm really no expert in this, but I say, don't be judgmental. If they're reading, great. And if you wish they would read other things, but put those books around the house too. But don't say, I don't like what you're reading. You know, they're too easy for you. You're smarter than that, and I want you to read this. Don't do that. It's a celebration when your kids read. Be happy that they're reading.
In your beginnings as a children's writer, did publishers or agents tell you your work was too edgy or controversial?
Never. Mm-mm. You know, it was the 70s, the early 70s. It was a wonderful time for children's book writers, the kids themselves. My kids came of age then. They had such wonderful books to read. I just would bring home so many great books. And so a lot of us started out together in the 70s. Richard Peck, Norma Klein. There were just a whole lot of us. And it was an open time, a freer time. And, you know, I found a young editor, publisher, who I realize now took a big chance on me. But what a wonderful relationship. That's Dick Jackson, and I wish that he could be here tonight. And he discovered me in the slush pile and nurtured me. And even now when I'm writing a book, I can hear Dick asking me questions about my characters. And that helps me with my revisions.
Who do you consider to be some of the great influences on your writing?
Well, okay. When I started out, I would go to the library, and I would come home with armloads of books. And I read them, and I would say, I don't want to write books like these. These books bore me. But, oh, I want to write books like these. And that would have been Beverly Cleary.
Solid
the best,
choice.
the best. And it would have been the early books of E.L. Konigsberg. And it was and Harriet the Spy. I loved Harriet the Spy. And so I knew I wanted to write, you know, I wanted to write contemporary books, and those were great influences for me.
If a film were being made about your life, who would you want to play you?
Oh, God. At what age?
Anyone you want.
I don't know. I'm not good at casting myself. Who do you think?
I don't know. Again, it would depend on, you
What
know,
age?
it would depend on, yeah, I don't know.
Margaret O'Brien. I loved Margaret O'Brien, and I loved Esther Williams. And I wanted to be Esther Williams because she could swim.
Sure.
You know, she could swim underwater and smile
Oh, yeah.
at the same time. I couldn't swim underwater anyway,
Right.
but to swim underwater and smile. And when she came out of the pool, there was always a Latin lover,
Ricardo Montalban.
right? I wanted a Latin lover.
Did you really?
I had no idea what that meant.
just Latin, like Caesar.
Latin, right. I didn't know where Latin lovers came from. They came from Latin, that's
Esther
right.
Williams.
Esther Williams.
I did not know
Sally
that.
Friedman, you know. Sally Friedman's my most autobiographical book. Mm-hmm. And so Esther and Margaret. Mm-hmm.
When you have had your books banned or criticized, how did you find the resilience to keep writing?
When it first happened, and I was a target of the censors, major target of the censors, I felt isolated and really sad. I felt alone, completely alone. And then I found a group called the National Coalition Against Censorship. And once we connected, I never felt that way again. And I became that determined person, you know. It's so much better to fight back than to sit home and be sad and lonely. go out there and do something. And I still work with the National Coalition Against Censorship, a wonderful small organization, and that's really effective. You know, you need help as a teacher, a librarian, a student, a parent. You call them and you'll get a human on the phone who will help you.
Is it hurtful when people are saying the book is bad for kids? I mean, even if you have total confidence that it's not and you're totally happy with everything you've written, is it hurtful to have people saying, like, I think this is bad for kids?
In the beginning, it was very hurtful. Now I just like, you know. No, I really, I take it seriously. If I get a thoughtful letter about why a parent doesn't want a child to read my book, I will respond to it. But I don't respond to the burn in hell. You know, you will burn in hell for writing these books.
Do you get that?
Oh, yeah.
What is your biggest pet peeve? That's what it says in the card. It says pet peeve. Short questions.
What is my biggest pet peeve? That deserves a short answer. Bigotry, I guess.
That's fair.
I just can't stand that.
It's pretty peevish. What inspires you to create such delicious characters? I like that question because it has the word delicious in it.
I wasn't inspired to create delicious characters. I didn't know anything, and so they came out somehow. And I'm glad somebody finds them delicious.
Delicious. It says delicious right on the
I
card.
hope you find those characters delicious because right now, I love them best.
Well,
They're my new babies.
I was going to say, I assume it's like that. And one of the things that's interesting about this book is that, you know, for those of you who haven't yet read it, the frame is sort of you start with Mary older, and then you go back and you see the story of this winter when the crashes happened, and then you come back and see sort of her again at the end. When you take characters for whom you have developed so much affection and you suddenly jump them forward several decades, is there that, do you feel like it felt almost like giving them, you know, blessings of you got this and you got this, finding them decades later and kind of giving them an outcome.
I wanted them, I never tie up loose ends in my books, but I wanted my readers to know, and I wanted to know what happened to them 35 years later. I wanted to know where they were 35 years later. And all the women who write to me and say, please, 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 can you write a book about Margaret in menopause? It's like, no. But Mary, this is not a spoiler, but on the first page, you know that Mary at age 50 is having a hot flash.
So finally, the Judy Blume Hot Flashes book has arrived after...
They've gone from hot to hot flashes.
After many requests. Do you have guilty pleasure books? Do you believe in that?
I do not believe in guilty pleasure books because I think that all reading is good and you don't have to feel guilty about anything that you want to read. Read, enjoy.
Going through a lot of these are questions where these people are very smart and asked a lot of stuff that we've already talked about.
Okay.
Because they are spot on it. Can you talk a little bit about the decision to this is not the first book that you've located in Elizabeth, is that correct? Or near Elizabeth, or partly in Elizabeth?
Deanie takes place in Elizabeth.
I was trying to figure out which one it was.
And goes to my junior high as I imagined her doing it. I used to have a lot of dreams. Sometimes still I dream I'm living in my old house in Elizabeth. It's funny, you know. It came up for sale a few years ago, and I wanted it. And George said, what are you going to do with it? And I didn't know. And so, of course, I didn't buy it. I mean, that was a ridiculous idea, but somehow I wanted it. I wanted my childhood home. Now the new people bought it, and they've changed it, so I don't want it anymore.
Same thing happened to my childhood home.
Oh, they've taken away the bordello bathroom. My father used to call it a bordello. Orchid and black tiles, and silver and orchid and black wallpaper. I had no idea what a bordello was, but it's so exciting.
Oh, boy.
It's gone.
There's a question in here about a lot of YA fiction being aimed at girls, and one of the things that it made me think of was, do you think, because I was talking to somebody about this recently, do you think that that their love of reading is socially supported better than boys' love of reading is socially supported? Because I feel like girls are more likely to kind of run around with packs of girls with books sticking out of their bags and stuff like that.
And they trade their books. They love to trade their books and talk about their books.
Because did you see like the armies of girls at BookCon? Of kind of girls growing up, armies of girls.
I know they were there.
Yeah. And
I didn't really see them, but I know they were there. I could feel them.
Do you feel like
I suppose. But I don't know what we do about that, except, try and get books that boys like into their hands. Like, what are you interested in? Whatever they're interested in is the way to do it, I guess, I hope.
So no bucket list items that we should know about beyond more of the same wonderful things.
It's so boring, more of the same. I don't have any bucket list. I wish I could make something up for you.
Well, I always think if you have something on your bucket list, then go do that thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
The idea of bucket lists is very much about accumulating things that you've decided not to do. You know what I mean? So that you can still have them on your list. You know what I mean?
I've done so much more than I ever dreamed of doing, and I've had so many more experiences than I ever thought I could possibly have. How could I, ask for more?
That seems like a wonderful note on which to close. I want to thank Judy Blume. I want to thank all of you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, honey.